Hello and welcome to the Physics Pickup Showcase and Tutorial. So first, let's go ahead and show off what this asset can do. So, being that this is a physics pickup system, clearly we need to be able to pick up objects. So if we walk up to an object, it highlights and gives us a little message at the bottom indicating that we can pick up this object. Now if we press E, it brings it to our hold location where we can carry around this object, drop it, and throw it. So if I drop it, it will drop and it will hit the ground and it will make a sound based on the surface that it hits. So if I hit this surface, and if I hit this surface. Now I can also throw the object by pressing the F key, and it launches the object slightly further. Now this is an offset pivot object, so if I zoom in, it doesn't exactly set exactly in the center. So if I take this object, you can see it's a little bit offset. It's slightly to the left and slightly up a little bit. Same thing if we grab this object, it's just slightly off. So if I zoom in, you can see it's closer to the top of the screen than it is to the center. Then we have objects that are too heavy. This is way too big to carry, and its weight is more than our character is set to be able to carry. So we can't pick this up, and it highlights in red and tells us that this is too heavy to carry. Then we have normal center pivot objects. So if I grab one of these and I zoom in, you can see it stays more centered than the other objects were. Now yes, you can zoom in and out, drop, and throw just like the other objects. Now the lighter the object, the further you will throw it. And with these spheres, if we drop it, it will roll on a surface. All of these sounds and their properties are customizable. So let's get into how this works. In our scene, we have a couple of objects set up. First, let's go ahead and go into our character and see what's happening in here. You can apply these properties to any character because it's controlled all in a component over here. Now, you need to add the physics pickup component. I believe it is BP physics pickup. Now there's a few things that you need to set up to use this component with your character. Is underneath your camera, you need to add two things. One of them is for the highlight, the post-process volume. You're going to need to add a post process. When you add this, it'll come up under rendering. And that's all you need to do. Everything else is controlled through the component. Then you also need to add a carry location to your follow character, or follow camera rather. So you're going to want to add the BP carry location, and then position it wherever you want to carry objects in your scene. Now this is for a specified carry location. What you saw in the example was a distance directly in front of the camera, and we'll get into that in a minute. Next up, we need to add a physics handle, which you can come up here, just physics handle, and it's right here under physics. And there's no customization that needs to be done to either the physics handle, carry location, or post-process volume. Now you're going to want to add a BP physics pickup component. BP physics pickup right here. Not the impact effect, the pickup. In the pickup, we can change the interaction distance, so how far away from the camera does an object need to be interactable. How wide is the interaction radius? Let's change the interaction radius to something like 50 to see this in effect. So, as you can see, I'm not directly in range with the rock, but I'm close enough to where it detects this rock as being selected. So same thing if I came over here to highlight on these, the closest to the object is the one that will be selected. To see this in a better view, we can change this pickup debug to persistent, or I would do for duration, so your scene doesn't get stuck up with all that. And you'll see this is the view that it's detecting. In fact, you might just want to do this for one frame if you're testing, like this. So then you can see exactly where is the camera looking to detect for these objects. So it's going to pick the object that it's closest to detecting. So the bigger, the harder it is to detect certain objects, like that object in the background, a little harder to get to. So if I instead change this down to 5, or it was initially, this is the interaction distance that we have. You can see it's a little smaller, but it's still a radius, so we don't have to be directly interacting with the object to be able to interact with it. Next up, we got interaction key. What key needs to be pressed to interact with it? You can add different keys, you can change gamepad inputs. Any key works. Next is the physics pickup descriptor prefix. Now this is a complex way of saying what needs to come before the name of the object for it to be inspectable. This object I want to be inspectable, so I need to come up here, and this was normally sm_mat preview mesh _02. All I did was add pi underscore to the beginning of that name, and now it is interactable. Also, make sure that all of your objects are simulating physics, because if they are not, you will not be able to carry these objects around. Next is the object carry speed. Let's go ahead and change this to 1 to see the difference. So now if I pick up this object, it snaps immediately and it stays directly in the center. For the most part, if we spin really fast, you can see it's dragging behind slightly, but for the most part, it's staying directly in the center. Now if I change this value down to something like 0.1, you'll see that it smoothly moves to the center, and there's quite a bit of lag before it moves to the center. Now we can slow this down even more to get a really slow effect, something like 0.01. And this will become very apparent very quickly. Very slow, and it really drags behind. So this isn't really the ideal movement, but it is possible if you have some use for it to move really, really slowly. Next up is the max carry mass. Now this is how heavy an object can be before it becomes too heavy for the character to carry. So right now, if we take a look at the rock, it's 550 mass. That's its mass in kilograms, but we'll just go ahead and say 550. Now the max mass is 500, so it's too heavy to carry. Now if I change this down to like 400, for example, we can now come in and interact with it, and I can pick it up and I can move it around. Now of course this is a little bit insane, it's too big of an object, clearly it wouldn't make sense to be able to pick that up. So to change that, simply change this back to 550. And now if we try to pick it up, we cannot, it's too heavy. And if I try to press the button, it does not let me. Next up is, how do we interact with this object? Do we press to grab it and press to drop it? Or do we press and hold to carry it? So, if I now have to press to hold it, now I have to hold down the E key, and when I let go, it drops. I let go, drops, but if I just tap it, it'll just drop again. The carry method. Right now it's set to carry in front of camera, and this is where the carry location comes into play. So if you just want to carry it directly in front of the camera for a certain from a certain distance, that's fine. But if we want to carry it at a specific location, that's where this carry location comes into play. So now it will detect this carry location, and it will carry the physics object at that specified location. So now if I grab an object, you can see it moves kind of towards the side of the screen here. And that's because that's where I want to carry it. Now the zoom function does not work when you're carrying at a specific location, simply because the carry location is not meant to move, it's meant to simulate a hand. So we have a character model in the game right now, so this wouldn't really be necessary. But if you don't have a player model, it's probably better to use this carry location, because then it simulates as if we're carrying it in the hand of the player. Next up is attach at bone. So if I use, for example, r_hand, r_, r dash, I believe it's r_hand. Nope, not r_hand. Let's go into the model and see what it is. So if I go into the skeletal mesh of the character, this on screen here, I go to the skeleton, I can find wherever the hand is. Hand_r is what I would want to use. So come in here, hand_r, and now we try it. I click on it. It brings it to the location of the hand, and it moves with the hand. Now this isn't exactly ideal for this character mesh just because that doesn't really work and we don't have an animation set up for it, but you can attach it to a bone. Next up is the rotation capability of the object. Do we want the object to keep its original rotation? Do we want it to face the camera, or do we want it to have free rotation? If we keep its original rotation, it will look like this. This is how the object is facing. Now I pick it up, and it will always be facing that exact same rotation, no matter which way I turn, no matter what objects I hit in the scene, it will always return to its original rotation. If I get it stuck in here, you see it's at an angle, but then I move it back, and it is in its original position. And then if I have free rotation, that means that it's able to do whatever it wants based on whatever it hits. So this one, being that it's an offset pivot, will kind of dangle like this. And if I hit anything, it can spin. If I spin it fast enough, it will spin in circles. And if I grab one of these objects, you can see it'll just be spinning super fast. It can actually get to spin. And no matter what the rotation is, we can move the camera around. It's not going to face the camera. And if it hits anything, it will change its rotation. It will add to its rotation, rather. Next is the highlight details. We can determine whether or not it's going to be highlighted, and we can debug that interaction. Same with the prompt. Do we want to show a prompt? If we do, what do we want it to say? And if it's not interactable, what do we want it to say, or do we want it to say anything at all? Extension details. This is the zoom feature, quote unquote, because it's not necessarily a zoom, it is more so a extension of the current hold location. So this is where we find our default hold location. If we're using the carry in front of camera, how far from the camera do we carry from? What's the closest distance it can get to the camera, and how far away can it get from the camera? And how fast does it extend? All the distance keys can be changed, and the reset keys can be changed based on whatever you choose. Then there's the throw details, whatever throw key needs to be pressed, and what the impulse is when you throw an object. And that's the base impulse, but the impulse changes based on the mass of the object. Now that we've gone through the character's capabilities, now we can get into the sound effects. So, I'm going to add a new object to our scene. It's going to be a simple cube. It'll be 0.5 by 0.5 by 0.5. It's going to simulate physics. It'll have a mass of 37, that's fine. And now, if I go ahead and go over to our world outliner, PI underscore at the beginning of the name, now we'll be able to walk up to it in our scene and pick it up. And it'll face the camera, and we can move it around, and we can drop it and everything. But, as you can see, it's not making any noise. Now, how do we get it to make a sound? First of all, click on the cube. Let's go ahead and scroll up here just so we can get a better view, and we're going to scroll this part down a little bit. We're going to add a component here. And we're just going to type in physics. And then there's the BP physics impact effect component. Now, if we add this, you're going to want to add this to every object you want to simulate sound. So coming down here to the default setup of this impact effect. Now, if you just click on the cube, it's not going to be here. You actually have to click on the component itself. And you'll get a few options here. Volume sensitivity, threshold, and sound setup. Now, once again, if we play, nothing's changed. It's not making any sound. It's not doing anything. So to change that, we need to set up some sounds. So let's go ahead and add an element here. Now, this element is a sound effect, a sound for a surface. When you're setting up the sounds, every element that you add is a surface. So let's say this surface we want to be this kind of stone area. Now you can have multiple different sounds. It will pick a sound and randomize it so that you can have a little bit of a diverse sound effect. And then there's the physical material that it's based on for that specific surface. Let's go ahead and add a sound here. And we're gonna, let's go ahead and play, see what happens. So as you can see, now it's playing that bounce sound effect, but it will play that sound effect no matter what the surface actually is. Now we did add a surface here, but we didn't specify when to use that surface. So we only want to use this surface if we're on the stone physical material. So if we go ahead and go into materials here, physical materials, we have M floor, physical material floor. So let's go ahead and add a physical material here. Add the floor material, and now if we hit it here, it doesn't play any sound. But if we hit it here, it plays that sound. Now, you can play the same sound effects for multiple physical materials. So, if we go ahead and add another one here for the metal, now it won't play anything here. It'll play something here, and it'll play the same thing on the metal. Same thing with multiple sound effects, it will just randomize what it plays. So if I go ahead and add another sound effect here, we go back to our sounds, cues, and bring in the clang sound effect, it'll randomize what it plays. So if I drop it, sometimes it plays the bounce sound effect, sometimes it plays the clang sound effect. No matter what, it won't play it on here, and it'll randomize on here. So the volume, sensitivity, and the threshold work hand in hand. The volume sensitivity is how easily and how loud a sound effect can play based on its threshold. How harsh does it have to hit to play a sound? Now these numbers, you really have to play with them to get what you're looking for. Nothing is necessarily based on anything, but 750 is good for basic objects. I believe this one. So if you want a sound effect to roll, you're going to want to bring the threshold down quite a bit. As you can see with these spheres, they're down very low. But if you don't want an object to roll as much, something maybe with sharp edges like this, you're going to want to bring it up to maybe 400 or so. This big object, we wanted to bring the threshold up really, really high so that it wasn't going to hit every single time a tiny vertex hit another surface. 400 seems to be pretty good for most of these. 750 is the default, but based on the collision of the object, you're going to want to mess with these numbers to get it right for each physical object. Then the sound setup, you can see that we have one sound cue and one physical material for each of the three different surfaces, which there is a stone, a kind of soft area, and then a metal. So this one we have the bounce sound effect for whenever we hit the floor. Then we have the metal clang sound effect whenever we hit metal. And then we have the soft bounce sound effect for whenever we hit the soft floor. And it's that simple. You add that to each of your physical objects that you want in your scene, and you customize it for each. Now, not every object has to have physical pickup added to it. So let's say we want to bring in this cube. We don't want to be able to pick this up. We just want it to have sound. So let's go ahead and simulate physics. And then we're going to add the physics impact effect. We'll set up one just for the floor. or this is bounce on the floor. Actually, I'll just leave it for all of them so we can do it on any surface. And the threshold's fine. Okay, so I didn't change the name. So I didn't add PI underscore to this world outliner object. So now we can't interact with it. We can push it around and it'll still make noise. So even the objects in your scene that you don't want to have a physical pickup ability and simulates physics, you can still just add sound to it, so it adds a little bit more immersion to your scene. And that wraps up the preview and tutorial of the physics pickup system for the Unreal Engine Marketplace. Thank you for watching.